Dr. Elias Carter never expected his night to be interrupted by a thunderous crash in the nearby forest. The sound was too sharp to be an ordinary storm, too powerful to be a falling tree. As he grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, the air smelled of burnt ozone, and a thin layer of smoke drifted through the trees. His instincts told him this was no ordinary accident. With cautious steps, he moved through the dense undergrowth, his heart pounding as he reached the crash site. There, lying amidst the shattered remains of what looked like an alien escape pod, was a massive creature, feathers blackened and torn, its wings twisted at unnatural angles. It had the proud form of an eagle but stood taller than any man, its deep violet eyes filled with pain and barely concealed fury. Elias hesitated, knowing that approaching an injured animal, especially an unknown one, was dangerous. But he wasn't just a veterinarian. He was a man who believed that every living being deserved a second chance. Slowly, he kneeled beside the creature, his voice low and steady. "You're hurt. I can help." The alien eagle, clearly intelligent, let out a weak but defiant screech, warning him to stay back. It was a guardian of the skies, a predator of the stars, and now it lay broken on a planet where flight was impossible. Elias saw the despair in its eyes, but he also saw the struggle, the will to survive. Bringing the alien back to his clinic was no easy task. The sheer size and weight of the creature made it nearly impossible to carry, but Elias was nothing if not resourceful. He returned with a makeshift stretcher, securing the injured being as best he could before pulling it towards safety. Hours passed before he finally had the creature inside, stabilizing it as he examined the injuries. The wings were beyond simple repair, bones shattered, muscles torn. If this had been an earthborn eagle, it would never fly again. But this was no ordinary bird. As Elias worked through the night, he spoke to the alien despite knowing it likely didn't understand. "You probably hate being grounded, don't you? You look like the kind that belongs in the sky." The creature, now too exhausted to resist, merely watched him, its breath shallow. Slowly, it responded in a deep, rumbling voice, though the words were foreign to Elias. But he didn't need a translator to understand what was being said. You cannot fix what is broken beyond repair. The next few days were a battle of patience and determination. Elias learned the alien's name, Vareth, through a rough exchange of words and gestures. Despite the initial resistance, Vareth soon realized he had little choice but to trust the human, at least for now. The creature's injuries began healing, but the real problem remained. Even with time, even with medicine, Vareth would never regain the strength to fly under Earth's gravity. On his home planet, the skies were lighter, the winds stronger. Here, he was nothing more than a prisoner in his own body. Elias refused to accept that. Humanity had conquered the skies before without wings, without natural gifts. They had built machines, crafted solutions, and found ways to defy gravity. If humans could do it, so could Vareth. And so, the real work began. Elias studied everything about Earth's atmosphere, about wing mechanics, about aerodynamics. He sketched designs, tested theories, and worked late into the night, building what he called a flight restoration system, a combination of lightweight exoskeleton support, thrusters for lift, and harnesses to assist wing movement. Vareth watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, still unwilling to believe that this human could give him back what he had lost. The first test was a failure. The mechanisms were too heavy, the balance was off, and Vareth collapsed under the weight of the device. He let out a furious screech, his pride wounded more than his body. "I am not a machine," he growled in a voice now understandable through a rough translation device Elias had set up. "I am a being of the wind, not a puppet bound by wires." Elias wiped the sweat from his brow, unshaken. "And humans are creatures of the ground. Yet we built ships that touch the stars. You don't need to be a machine. You just need a chance." Days turned into weeks, and with every failed attempt, Elias adjusted, improved, refined. He added stabilizers, reduced weight, strengthened the wing supports. Vareth, despite his frustration, began to see something in the human, a determination that rivaled his own. He had heard tales of humanity before, but he had never believed them. A species without wings, without strength, yet they had conquered the void. Perhaps there was something worth learning here after all. Then came the final test. The winds were strong that morning, the perfect moment for an attempt. Elias had modified the system to work in harmony with Varith's natural wing movements, allowing the thrusters to activate only when needed. "This is it," Elias said as he secured the last strap. "You either fly today or we go back to the drawing board." Varith flexed his wings, feeling the subtle power of the supports. His heart pounded. He had faced battle, survived the void of space, but this terrified him. What if he failed? What if he truly was broken? Elias saw the hesitation and placed a firm hand on the alien's feathered shoulder. "You once flew among the stars. You can do it again." With a deep breath, Varith stepped forward, spreading his wings. The thrusters activated, a surge of power lifting him from the ground. The wind caught beneath him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the sensation of freedom. Higher and higher he went, the weight of gravity still present but no longer his cage. Then, with a single, mighty beat of his wings, Varith soared. Elias watched from below, a grin spreading across his face. He had done the impossible. Not just fixed a body, but restored a soul. As Varith circled back, his powerful form silhouetted against the rising sun, he let out a cry that echoed through the sky, a call of victory, of gratitude. And as he disappeared beyond the clouds, Elias simply whispered, "Now that's what I call a success." The night was cold, the Alaskan wilderness silent, except for the distant howling of the wind. Dr. Helen Marsh stood outside her clinic, sipping coffee to keep warm, when a sudden explosion tore through the sky. She watched in shock as a burning object streaked across the heavens, crashing somewhere beyond the frozen hills. The impact sent a deep tremor through the ground, and for a moment, everything was still. Then came the sound, a low, pained screech, unlike anything she had ever heard. Instinct kicked in. Grabbing her medical bag, she jumped onto her snowmobile and sped toward the crash site, the beam of her headlight cutting through the thick darkness. The wreckage was massive. Twisted metal and shattered glass lay scattered across the snow, steam rising from the broken remains of what looked like an alien escape pod. Helen had seen enough news reports to know humanity wasn't alone in the universe anymore, but this was the first time she had ever come face to face with something truly extraterrestrial. Amidst the debris, she spotted movement. A massive figure, covered in metallic blue feathers, lay sprawled in the snow. Its wings, once powerful and majestic, were now bent at unnatural angles, the bones sticking out in places where the flesh had torn. Its breathing was labored, and its golden eyes flickered weakly. Cautiously, Helen approached, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. The creature let out a deep growl, but it was too weak to fight. "Easy," she whispered, kneeling beside it. "I can help." The alien, despite its pain, fixed its gaze on her. There was intelligence there, something beyond primal instinct. It understood her. Without hesitation, Helen went to work, stabilizing the creature as best she could. The injuries were severe. This was no simple case of broken bones. Whatever species it belonged to, its anatomy was complex, but Helen had spent years studying avian physiology. If it had wings, she could fix them. Transporting the alien back to her clinic was a challenge, but she managed. Once inside, she cleaned its wounds, setting the bones and stitching the torn muscles with careful precision. As she worked, she noticed the markings on its armor, symbols of rank, honor. This was no ordinary traveler. This was a warrior. By the time dawn arrived, the creature was stable, though unconscious. Helen sat beside it, exhausted, wondering if she had just made first contact in the most unexpected way possible. When the alien awoke, panic flashed in its eyes. It tried to move, but the pain kept it down. Helen placed a gentle hand on its wing. "You're safe," she said. "I fixed what I could." The creature's gaze softened slightly, and after a moment, it spoke in a deep, rumbling voice, though the words were rough and broken. "Where am I?" Helen blinked in surprise. It could communicate. "Earth," she answered. "You crashed. I found you." The alien studied her before exhaling sharply. "I am Raith Kayar," it said. guardian of the Skyborn. Over the next few days, Helen learned more about her unusual patient. Rithkayar came from a race of aerial warriors who lived their entire lives in flight. They were built for the skies, for battle among the stars. But now, with his wings broken, he saw himself as nothing. To his kind, losing flight was worse than death. Helen, however, refused to let that be the end of his story. She showed him humanity's resilience, the way humans, despite having no wings of their own, had conquered the skies through technology and determination. But Rithkayar was skeptical. "Machines are not flight," he growled. "You do not understand what it means to truly soar." Helen wasn't deterred. She spent days designing a custom exoskeleton, studying every aspect of Rithkayar's anatomy. With the right technology, she believed she could restore his ability to fly, even in Earth's heavier gravity. But Rithkayar resisted. "I am not a machine," he snarled when she showed him the first prototype. "You think you can replace my wings with metal? I would rather remain grounded." Helen's patience ran thin. "Then you'll never fly again," she snapped. "You can either stay here and rot in self-pity, or you can fight for your freedom. The choice is yours." Her words struck something deep within him. Days passed, and Rithkayar, though reluctant, allowed Helen to continue her work. The exoskeleton was refined, made lighter, more responsive. It wasn't just about giving him artificial wings, it was about restoring what he had lost. The first attempt was a failure. Rithkayar tried to lift off, but the weight distribution was wrong, causing him to crash painfully to the ground. Frustration burned in his eyes. "This will never work," he growled. Helen simply tightened her jaw. "Then we try again." And they did. Again and again. Each failure brought improvements, adjustments. Rithkayar, despite his pride, began to see the determination in Helen, a trait that reminded him of his own kind. Slowly, something changed. The system became an extension of his body, the artificial supports working in perfect harmony with his movements. And then the moment of truth arrived. Helen led him to a high cliff, where the wind howled fiercely. "This is it," she said. "No more tests. No more doubts. You either take this leap or you don't." Rithkayar stood at the edge, the abyss below stretching endlessly. Fear, doubt, they clawed at his mind. But then he looked at Helen, this human who had fought for him when he had already given up. Taking a deep breath, he spread his wings. The thrusters activated, the exoskeleton adjusting as he moved. He stepped forward, then leapt. For a terrifying moment, there was nothing but the rush of air. Then, instinct took over. His wings caught the wind, the supports humming with power. He beat them once, then again, and suddenly he was rising. Higher, faster. The sky embraced him. The wind roared in his ears. He was flying. He was skyborn again. Helen watched from below, her heart racing as Rithkayar soared above the clouds, twisting and turning with the ease of a master of the skies. She had done it. He had done it. When he finally landed beside her, there was no arrogance, no skepticism. Only gratitude. "You are no simple healer," he said. "You are a warrior of the impossible." Helen smiled. "Humans don't give up," she said simply. "Neither should you." With a final nod, Rithkayar turned toward the heavens. He had a war to return to, a duty to fulfill. And now, thanks to one stubborn human, he could. With a mighty leap, he took to the skies once more, disappearing into the stars. Helen watched until he was gone, knowing she had just changed the course of an entire species. And maybe, just maybe, they had changed her too. Dr. Marcus Hale had always believed that flight was more than just science. It was a language, an art, a connection between the sky and those who dared to conquer it. As one of Earth's leading veterinarians specializing in avian rehabilitation, he had spent his life helping wounded birds regain their wings. But nothing in his career had prepared him for what crashed into the valley behind his isolated mountain clinic one stormy night. The explosion shook the earth, sending a shockwave that rattled the windows and knocked books from the shelves. Stepping onto his porch, flashlight in hand, he saw smoke rising in the distance, curling against the backdrop of jagged peaks. His instincts screamed at him to investigate. Navigating the treacherous terrain, Marcus finally reached the crash site, a ruined metal pod, half buried in the rocky earth, its hull still glowing with heat. But it was the creature lying just beyond the wreckage that made his breath catch. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, massive, sleek, and feathered in shimmering hues of deep silver and blue. The being's wings, once powerful and majestic, were now crumpled, twisted at unnatural angles. It let out a weak, rasping cry, its golden eyes flickering with both pain and defiance. Marcus knew a wounded predator when he saw one, and this was no ordinary bird. This was an alien, a being built for the skies, now trapped on the ground. Cautiously, he approached, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're hurt. Let me help you." The alien flinched, struggling to move, but agony forced it to stay down. Marcus could see the intelligence behind those piercing eyes. It understood him, maybe not his words, but his intent. The decision was made in an instant. He couldn't leave it here to die. With careful movements, he draped a thick blanket over the creature, whispering reassurances as he worked. Dragging it back to his clinic was an impossible task, but Marcus was nothing if not resourceful. He retrieved an old sled, securing the alien as best as he could before pulling it through the cold night. Hours later, the creature lay on the floor of his clinic, its labored breathing the only sound breaking the silence. Marcus worked tirelessly, setting the broken wing bones, stitching the torn muscles. He noted the alien's armor, the strange insignia across its chest. This wasn't just a lost traveler. It was a warrior, a creature of battle. The realization hit him. If it was here, then something had gone terribly wrong. But first, survival. Everything else could wait. When the alien finally awoke, it bolted upright, knocking over medical equipment. Its wings twitched instinctively, but pain stopped them from fully extending. "Easy," Marcus said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. The alien narrowed its glowing eyes. Then, to his astonishment, it spoke. "Who are you?" The words were rough, strained, but understandable. Marcus exhaled in relief. "Dr. Marcus Hale. A veterinarian. I fix broken wings." The alien's gaze darkened. "Then you waste your time. My wings are beyond repair." Marcus had seen that look before, the hopelessness in injured birds that believed they would never fly again. He refused to accept it. "I don't believe in beyond repair," he said firmly. "I believe in flight." The days that followed were a test of patience and resilience. The alien, who eventually revealed its name as Valrax, was a proud warrior of the Carthaean Skyborn, a species that lived their entire lives in the air. They were born in flight, fought in flight, and died in flight. To be grounded was a fate worse than death. Valrax made it clear, if he could not return to the skies, he would rather not live at all. But Marcus refused to let him give up. He treated the alien's wounds with care, ensuring the bones healed properly. Yet the greater challenge remained. Valrax's wings were too damaged to function as they once had. No amount of medicine could change that. But Marcus had another idea. Using his expertise in aerodynamics and bird rehabilitation, he began designing something entirely new: an exoskeletal flight support system, one that would work with Valrax's remaining strength to restore his ability to fly. The alien was resistant at first. "I am not a machine," he growled when Marcus showed him the blueprints. "I will not wear metal wings like a crippled creature." But Marcus didn't back down. "This isn't about replacing what you lost," he argued. "It's about giving you a chance to fly again. You think humans were born with wings? No. We built them. We conquered the sky because we refused to be bound by the earth. You have a choice, Valrax. Fight for your wings, or stay here and let them wither." For the first time, the alien was silent. The first test flight was a disaster. The exoskeleton was too heavy, throwing off balance. Valrax crashed hard, letting out an enraged snarl. Marcus rushed to his side, expecting fury, expecting the alien to quit. Instead, Valrax clenched his jaw. Again. And so, they tried again. And again. Every failure brought improvements. Marcus adjusted the weight, refined the mechanics, modified the wing support structures to work with Veilrax's natural movements rather than against them. The alien warrior trained relentlessly, regaining his strength, relearning what it meant to command the wind. Then came the moment of truth. At dawn, Marcus led Veilrax to the highest peak in the valley, where the wind howled fiercely. The exoskeleton was lighter, stronger, perfectly synchronized with his movements. "This is it," Marcus said. "No more tests. No more doubts. If you want to fly, now's the time." Veilrax stepped to the edge, staring at the endless sky before him. For a moment, fear crept into his expression. Then, he spread his wings. The thrusters activated, the exoskeleton humming to life. He took a single step forward, then leapt. The fall lasted only a heartbeat before the wind caught him. The supports adjusted, the mechanisms synchronized, and suddenly he was rising. Higher. Faster. The sky wrapped around him like an old friend, and a deep, victorious cry tore from his throat. Marcus watched from below, his heart pounding as Veilrax twisted and dove, testing the limits of his newfound wings. He had done it. The warrior was flying again. When Veilrax finally landed, his golden eyes met Marcus's. "You are more than a healer," he said, his voice filled with something Marcus hadn't heard before: respect. "You are a flight whisperer." Marcus chuckled. "I just gave you a push. The rest was all you." Veilrax extended his clawed hand in gratitude. "One day, I will return this favor, human. You have given me back my sky." And with that, he took off once more, disappearing beyond the clouds. Marcus watched until he was gone, knowing that somewhere, out in the vast universe, a warrior soared once more because of him. The storm raged across the mountains, lightning tearing through the sky like cracks in the fabric of the universe. Dr. Evelyn Carter had seen many storms in her years as a veterinarian in this isolated region, but something about this one felt different. The wind carried a sound faint but unmistakable, a cry, not of any earthly creature, but something larger, something wounded. Grabbing her medical kit, she pulled on her heavy coat and stepped into the storm, following the eerie, distant wail that sent shivers down her spine. The wreckage lay scattered across the valley, smoke rising from twisted metal that hissed under the falling rain. Evelyn's heart pounded. She had seen news reports of extraterrestrial encounters, of hidden wars fought in the shadows of the galaxy. But never had she imagined she would witness something like this. And then she saw it, a massive, bird-like figure sprawled across the ground, its wings broken, its feathers soaked in blood. Even through the destruction, the creature was breathtaking, its body lined with shimmering silver and black feathers, its talons sharp enough to rend steel. But what struck her the most were its eyes burning gold, filled with both fury and pain. As she approached, the alien let out a weak growl, trying to lift its head but failing. Evelyn knelt cautiously beside it, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "I'm here to help," she said, reaching for her medical bag. The alien's gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment, something passed between them, an understanding, fragile but real. It exhaled sharply, its resistance faltering, and Evelyn took that as permission to begin. She worked quickly, stabilizing the worst of the wounds. The wings were the biggest challenge. Their structure was unlike anything she had ever seen, both organic and mechanical, as if grown and forged together. Setting the bones was delicate work, but Evelyn had spent years rehabilitating birds of prey, and she treated this alien no differently. By the time she was done, exhaustion weighed on her, but the creature was breathing steadily now, no longer trembling in pain. She knew that getting it back to her clinic would be nearly impossible alone, but she couldn't leave it to die. It took everything she had to load the massive body onto the sled she had dragged with her. Every muscle burned as she pulled it through the relentless wind, but she refused to stop. Hours later, she collapsed in the doorway of her clinic, drenched, shaking, but victorious. The alien was safe. Now, she had to save its wings. When it woke, it startled violently, nearly knocking over the operating table. Evelyn stepped back, hands raised. "You're safe," she said. The alien blinked, processing its surroundings. Then, In a voice deep and rough, it spoke. "Where am I?" Evelyn's breath caught. It could talk. "My clinic," she answered. "You crashed. I brought you here." The alien studied her for a long moment before exhaling. "I am Zephyr of the Skyrend. A warrior. A creature built for the skies." And now he was grounded. Days passed in a tense routine of healing and silent battles. Zephyr barely tolerated her presence at first, his pride keeping him distant. Evelyn had seen this before in injured birds' predators who believed they were nothing without their wings. "You'll fly again," she told him firmly one night as she adjusted the bindings on his damaged wing. He scoffed. "You do not understand. My kind are born in the wind. Without it, we are nothing." Evelyn set down her tools, meeting his gaze. "Then we'll bring you back to the wind." She threw herself into studying his anatomy, combining medical science with engineering, testing prototypes that could reinforce his broken wings. But Zephyr resisted. "This is not flight," he growled when she showed him the first design. "You cannot replace what has been lost." Frustration burned in Evelyn's chest. "No one's replacing anything," she snapped. "We're rebuilding. If you're too stubborn to fight for it, then fine, stay here and rot. But I don't believe that's who you are." For the first time, Zephyr had no response. The first flight attempt was disastrous. The reinforced wings couldn't handle the weight, and he crashed hard, sending a wave of dust and broken branches flying. Zephyr roared in frustration, slamming a claw into the ground. "It's useless." Evelyn wiped sweat from her forehead, stepping toward him. "Then we try again." And so they did. Over and over, each failure leading to improvements. Evelyn adjusted the balance, strengthened the exoskeleton, and Zephyr, despite his doubts, trained relentlessly. His body grew stronger, his control sharper. The day came when he no longer crashed but hovered, just for a moment, before gravity pulled him back down. That flicker of success changed everything. Then, the final test. At dawn, Evelyn led him to the highest peak, where the wind howled fiercely. "This is it," she said, her heart pounding. Zephyr stood at the edge, the sky stretching endlessly before him. His wings twitched, the reinforced structures humming with potential. For a long moment, he hesitated. Then, he spread his wings. The exoskeleton activated, adjusting seamlessly with his movements. He took a breath, then stepped forward, falling plummeting until, with a mighty beat, he caught the wind. He rose. Higher, faster, slicing through the sky like a blade. Evelyn's breath caught as Zephyr twisted and soared, testing his limits, the wind rushing past him in wild exhilaration. He was flying, not just with metal and mechanics, but with instinct, with spirit. He was reborn in the wind. When he finally landed, he looked at Evelyn with something she hadn't seen before: gratitude, respect. "You have given me back my sky," he said, voice deep with emotion. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." Evelyn smiled. "Just promise me one thing." Zephyr tilted his head. "What? Never stop flying?" He let out a deep, rumbling chuckle before spreading his wings once more. With a powerful leap, he took to the skies, disappearing into the clouds. Evelyn watched until he was gone, feeling the wind wrap around her like an old friend. She had done what she was meant to do. Somewhere out there, Zephyr soared among the stars. And that was enough. Dr. Adrian Clark never expected his quiet life as a veterinarian to be interrupted by something out of this world. His days were spent tending to injured eagles, falcons, and the occasional lost wolf that wandered too close to civilization. But everything changed the night the sky split open. A streak of fire tore across the heavens, vanishing behind the distant mountain ridge. The explosion that followed sent tremors through the earth, rattling his small clinic on the edge of the wilderness. For a moment, silence followed an eerie, unnatural stillness. Then, the wind carried a sound that made his breath hitch. A cry. Not human. Not entirely animal. Something else. Something wounded. Grabbing his medical bag and a flashlight, Adrian set out toward the crash site. The forest was thick with shadows, and the scent of burning metal lingered in the air. As he crested the ridge, his eyes widened. A ship, if it could even be called that, lay in ruins, its sleek, metallic hull cracked and smoking against the jagged rocks. But it wasn't the wreckage that stole his breath. It was the creature lying just beyond it. The alien was massive, its body draped in deep indigo feathers, tinged with streaks of silver. Its wings, once majestic, now mangled and twisted, were spread uselessly across the ground. Its talons twitched weakly, and its chest rose and fell in uneven, shallow breaths. Even in its broken state, there was power in its form, an undeniable presence. But what struck Adrian the most were its eyes, glowing amber, filled with both intelligence and pain. It was watching him. Instinct told him to be cautious, but something deeper pushed him forward. He had treated injured raptors all his life. He knew the look of a creature fighting to survive. Kneeling slowly, he spoke, unsure if it would understand. "I can help you." The alien let out a weak, rasping noise, something between a growl and a sigh. Its breathing hitched, and Adrian knew time was running out. He worked quickly, assessing the damage. The left wing was broken in multiple places, feathers torn and soaked with dark, unfamiliar blood. More concerning were the deep gashes along its side, likely from the crash. If he didn't stop the bleeding soon, the alien wouldn't last the night. With careful hands, he retrieved his supplies. The alien tensed as he approached, its golden eyes narrowing. "You're going to have to trust me," Adrian murmured. He had no idea if it understood him, but after a long pause, it stilled, allowing him to work. Hours passed as he stitched wounds and stabilized the broken bones as best as he could. Every now and then, the alien made a low sound, whether in pain or gratitude. He couldn't tell. By the time he finished, exhaustion weighed on him. The creature was alive. But for how long? Adrian knew he couldn't leave it here. Getting it back to his clinic was nearly impossible alone, but he refused to let it die in the cold. Using a tarp and sheer determination, he managed to drag the alien back, each step a battle against fatigue. When he finally reached the clinic, he collapsed beside the creature, his breath ragged. He had done his part. Now, it was up to fate. When the alien awoke, the reaction was immediate. It bolted upright, knocking over medical equipment with a force that sent tools clattering to the floor. Adrian barely had time to step back before those piercing golden eyes locked onto him. "Where am I?" Adrian froze. The voice was deep, resonant, but more than that, it was clear. Intelligent. The alien was speaking his language. "You're in my clinic," Adrian replied cautiously. "I found you after the crash. Your injuries were severe. I did what I could." The alien exhaled, glancing down at its bound wing, at the carefully stitched wounds. When it spoke again, there was something unreadable in its tone. "You are a healer." "I'm a veterinarian," Adrian corrected. "I fix broken wings." The alien let out something that might have been a chuckle. "Then you have chosen the right patient." Over the next few days, the alien who introduced himself as Kalar grew stronger, but with that strength came frustration. Kalar belonged to the Velari, a species that lived in the skies of distant worlds. They were not meant for the ground. "I must fly," he insisted, his talons flexing against the floor. "I cannot stay here." Adrian crossed his arms. "Your wings aren't healed yet. If you try to fly now, you'll only make things worse." Kalar's golden eyes darkened. "A Velari who cannot fly is nothing." Adrian had heard that tone before from eagles who had lost their wings, from falcons who no longer believed they would ever soar again. He refused to let Kalar give up. "Then we'll get you back in the sky," he said firmly. "But you have to let me help you." The days turned into weeks. Adrian crafted supports for Kalar's wings, using a mix of lightweight alloys and reinforced exoskeletal structures, adjusting them until they worked seamlessly with the alien's natural form. Training was grueling. The first attempts ended in failure. Kalar stumbled, his wings unable to fully support him. But he never stopped trying. With each attempt, he improved, relearning how to move, how to balance, how to trust the wind once more. Then came the final test. At dawn, Adrian led Kaler to a high cliff overlooking the valley, the wind howling against them. "This is it," Adrian said. "No more training wheels. You either fly or you don't." Kaler stood at the edge, his wings twitching, his breath steady. For the first time in weeks, there was no hesitation, only resolve. He leapt. For a heart-stopping moment, he fell. Then his wings caught the wind. The reinforced structures adjusted, and with a powerful beat, he soared. Higher. Faster. The morning sun caught against his silver-tipped feathers, turning him into a streak of light against the sky. Adrian watched, breathless, as Kaler twisted and dove, testing the limits of his flight, his laughter ringing through the air like thunder. When he finally landed, his golden eyes met Adrian's with something that could only be described as gratitude. "You have given me back my sky." He extended a taloned hand. "You are no ordinary healer, human. You are a doctor of the stars." Adrian smirked, shaking his hand. "I just gave you a push. The rest was all you." Kaler's wings flared as he prepared to take off once more. "If ever you find yourself among the stars, Adrian Clark, call my name. You will not be forgotten." With that, he took to the skies, disappearing beyond the clouds. Adrian watched until he was gone, the wind rushing past him in quiet acknowledgement. He had saved many creatures in his lifetime. But this was something else entirely. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, a Valari soared once more. Because of him.